Hi, and welcome to the Pink Movement podcast with your host, Christy Collier. Each episode, you'll hear from some awesome people in and around the breast cancer world, sharing their wisdom on all things health and well-being. You'll hear simple information, practical advice, and useful tips to help you stress less, move more, and feel better.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Pink Movement podcast for 2018. For those of you joining us again and who listened last year, welcome back. And for those new listeners, a big warm welcome to you all. My name is Christy Collier and I am the host of the Pink Movement podcast, and thank you very much for joining me. I'm really excited to share with you all the great episodes and information we've got in the year ahead on the podcast. But not only you, this information needs to reach as many women out there going through breast cancer as possible. So, just a friendly reminder that if you can jump on over to iTunes and rate and review this podcast, that would be fantastic. Basically, it helps make the podcast easier to find for others who are searching for this type of information. And also, don't forget to mention the podcast to your breast care nurse or support group and any others who you feel might benefit. Now, in today's episode, I'm chatting with Susan Palmer, who is the founder and CEO of an online tool called Gather My Crew. Now, I think this tool is absolutely amazing, and I wish it was around when I was in the midst of my treatment and recovery, because I most definitely would have used it. Without giving too much away, because Susan really goes into depth on sharing with us what it's all about, it's essentially an online tool that allows you to list all the things you need help with when you are going through breast cancer. And this can be anything relating to home, food, transport, children, pets, social activities, etc. Then you invite those around you, your friends, family, colleagues, to become part of your crew, and they then choose and select what they can help you with. It's very simple and it's all done through the online tool. Put simply, I think Gather My Crew solves two very real problems when going through breast cancer. The first is that those going through breast cancer often need help, but also find it very difficult to ask for help. I know I am most certainly in that boat. And second, the community around those going through breast cancer, our friends, our family, our colleagues, genuinely want to help, but often don't know what it is that they can help with. And that is where Gather My Crew comes in. Launched just last year, Gather My Crew is having a real impact on the lives of those who use it. And it's probably worth adding in here too that this tool, although very relevant for those of us going through breast cancer, is actually available to anybody who is going through a crisis of any sort. And it's also completely free. So please take some time and listen to today's podcast. And then if you or anyone you know would benefit from using this fabulous tool, head on over to gathermycrew.org and get started.
Susan Palmer is a registered psychologist and health consultant and the founder and CEO of Gather My Crew, which is what we're here to talk to her about today. A passion to build healthier and stronger communities, combined with Susan's clinical, research and consulting experience, is really what created the foundation for this unique project. Susan, thank you so much for joining me on the Pink Movement podcast today, and welcome.
Thank you, Christy. It's a thrill to be here.
Fantastic. Now, I'd just like to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit more about you, about yourself, so your background and how you came to be founder and CEO of Gather My Crew.
Okay, so I am a psychologist and I also have a research PhD in psychology, and I now have a Master's of Public Health as well, so I guess I would be considered a little bit of a nerd, and someone who's always been very interested in people and how people work together as communities. I've worked with cancer patients and people following spinal injury and with families whose children have congenital conditions over the past 20 years. And in each step of the way, while working as a clinician, the researcher in me has always been trying to find better ways of doing things. And through my career, have done a number of different research projects to try and understand how things are working better so that my clinical work can be improved by evidence and research. And so I guess, after 20 years and identifying that a lot of people going through hard times don't activate their community the way that they could to use it to its best, I guess I started to think about that from a research perspective and think about how I could solve that. And that is where Gather My Crew came from. It's the combination of the research but also that 20 years of clinical experience combined, and this is where we end up with Gather My Crew.
So, Susan, please tell us everything you can about Gather My Crew. What is it? Who's it for? How does it work?
I'd love to do that, Christy. So after 20 years of working with people going through something awful, whether it be a cancer diagnosis or a spinal injury or looking after families that had a difficult birth and a child with congenital conditions, I was always in the position of talking to them as their psychologist about making sure that they gathered their crew around them to get them through. These things are universally awful. We know that it's a hard road, whichever, issue you're dealing with. Bad things happen to good people all the time, but the way to kind of get through it as best you can is to make sure that you've got a supportive network around you. And part of my role when talking to people in these situations was about saying to them, make sure you have a list of all the practical tasks that you need help with, so that when your friends, family, neighbours, school mums, colleagues say to you, what can I do to help? You can say to them, well, on Thursday, Jimmy needs to be picked up from school and taken to soccer, and then he needs to be dropped back here. That'd be great. And on Friday, I've got chemo, and I really would like someone to sit with me while I'm sitting in my inpatient ward. And so it's really engaging those people that are already there and making sure they know practical tasks that they can do to help you. And I spent a long time talking to people about this, and in my mind had assumed that, this was good advice. They were getting it from their psychologist. It would make sense that they went away and just did it. And then was in the position a few years back where my own friend was in a situation where she was going to be flat on her back for a period of a couple of months as they fused her spine together. And I went about asking her, well, what practical task can I take off your to-do list, assuming that someone had a similar conversation with her that I always did with the people I was supporting. And she just fell in a heap and had nothing in place. And so I then decided to be that, the doer, and put it all together for her. Get a list of all of the people in the class that were willing to help. She had 5-year-old twins, same age as one of my children, and talk to them about whether they could help, which they all did, because people are good and people want to help. And they all wanted to help. And then I had a list of everything she needed. And 5-year-old twins are hard work. They've got school drop-offs and pick-ups. They've got lunch boxes. They've got dinners. They've got after-school activities. They've got weekends when left to their own devices running around their house will drive you insane. And so all of these tasks needed to be thought about. And I ended up with a list that was as long as my arm. And these beautiful 30 people wanting to help. But to put it all together and make it work was so much work. I became thoroughly overwhelmed very quickly in how I was going to put this together in something that was meaningful and for a period of months. And so I started really looking around to see if I could find an online solution to this, because it's such a simple idea, and I assumed someone else had created it, and I couldn't find anything. I could find things like Meal Train, which I think people are quite familiar with, but it just didn't go deep enough. It didn't provide all of those different things that people need help with. And so I spoke to a few of my colleagues back in the area of oncology, and at that time I was actually working with breast cancer patients, and so I spoke to them about what they needed, and that was the birth of Gather My Crew. So something that your audience might find interesting is that because I was working specifically with breast cancer patients when this idea was first formed, the focus groups that we used and the expertise and experience of the lived experience of people who've been there were all breast cancer patients.
Right.
So it's very much kind of, we're building from an oncology breast cancer base, and then we're expanding it from there. And the thoughts behind that is that, you know, particularly young breast cancer patients who may have dependent children upon them, there's very little that is as challenging to a family as when mum is taken out with an illness. And so that's why we wanted to kind of identify the most challenging situation and build it around that, and then everyone else would also be able to use it because it would be just as valuable for them.
Yeah, wow. It's such a, as you say, amazing that that this sort of online solution to this didn't exist already, because it is a sort of a simple concept, but it's not there. But it really talks to solving, I think, two very big problems that you have when you go through breast cancer or any cancer or, you know, serious trauma. And that is that it's very, very hard to ask for help. And people want for help, but they don't know how. So this really finds solutions to those two very big problems. And I know myself from going through breast cancer, everyone would say, what can I do? And I would never say, God, I just need the vacuuming done and the bathroom cleaned, because Jesus, I would never ask anybody to do that. But, you know, but they would want to. They would be more than happy to do that. They want to help. I wanted the help, but there was that missing link about how to actually get that to happen.
Yeah, and I think we call this the bridge. So Gather My Crew is the bridge between you needing and wanting the help and them desperately wanting to help you. And when I've spoken to other people who have been through the support team of people going through something like this, it's a gift to be able to help someone you care
Absolutely.
about. Your support team gets so much from it. They feel like they're doing something constructive. They often feel disempowered because they're watching someone struggle that they care about so much and can't do anything to help, which is why you get those piles of lasagnas and those bunches of flowers that just end up rotting in the vase. So, you know, it really is, it's about shifting that thinking around asking for help, but also making it just so much easier.
Yeah.
And that's the feedback that we've got from users who are telling us that I would never have asked for help before this, and this just makes it all so much easier.
Yeah, and it's a practical tool, you know. It's very, and I think, and you can explain to us exactly how it works, but from what I'm understanding, if I am the patient, the person going through breast cancer, I'm creating the things I need help with, and then all the people in my community, my partner, my parents, my friends, are able to go in there and help when they can. Is that right? And maybe you can explain to us exactly how it works.
Okay, well, so again, this was identified with the breast cancer patients who helped us develop it in the start. And we did a number of focus groups and spoke to them about all the things that they need help with when they're going through their treatment and recovery. I think people often think that once treatment's completed, that the need for help is completed, when we know that
it's not.
Survivorship, exactly, survivorship is hard work and exhausting, and the after effects can linger. So it's not just for treatment, it's also for beyond that. So we spoke to these people, and we've created a list of over 80 tasks that can be clicked and selected. So you get onto the Gather My Crew website, you register to create an account, and then the first thing you have to do is identify all those areas, and they're under subheadings of home, food, transport, children, pets, social and other. And you go into all of these things, and it's got things like change the bed sheets, or put the towels out. So when you think about, you know, post-surgery and then trying to change sheets or carry heavy towels, it's actually dangerous for your recovery, but it's also very uncomfortable and difficult to do. But who thinks to say, can I come around and change all your bed sheets on Tuesday? So what we've done is by making sure that we've got the right people creating the task list. It identifies things you didn't know you needed help with until you see them. And you click and select those things, then you invite all of your community. And what we know, and many breast cancer survivors would know themselves, is that who you think's going to come through may not be there for you. And who you hadn't thought of, that neighbour 3 doors down, may be an angel that you hadn't even noticed before. So we encourage people to think broadly about their community. Think about your neighbours. Think about the school community. Think about your sport community, your church community, your colleagues, your partner's colleagues, because your partner's going to be struggling too, and their colleagues are going to be wanting to help. So thinking very broadly about who your community is, you invite them to be part of your crew. Then when they accept their unique invite, it can only be used once, so it can't be handed over to one person, another person, a nurse person, which is for privacy reasons. They then can come in and they see your calendar, which is your account, and that what they'll see initially is a whole lot of red circles, and those red circles are all the things that you need help with. And they can come in and click on the things that they can help with, and then they're just identified as something that they're doing. The benefit of that is that they can look in and say, look, I'm not available Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, but Wednesday afternoon I'm free, and they can click on the things that you need done on Wednesday afternoon, which means you're matching up your needs with their availability, which means what we've found is that people get more help than they normally would have, because, instead of that awkward eye-to-eye conversation where you say, please, can you do X, Y, Z?
Yes.
And someone either awkwardly saying no or saying yes, but then thinking in my head, oh my God, I'm going to have to do so much shuffling around in my own life to achieve this for them. It's matching it all up for them and making it work for everybody. Then what Gather My Crew does is that we have this coordinated update system where people get updated about what's happening and who's doing what and who needs more tasks. And, we keep the communication working so that the community can stay strong throughout however long it's needed.
I mean, it sounds amazing, and I wish I was aware of this back, when I went through this, because it would have been a godsend.
But we are quite new. I wish we'd be around too, Christy, but, I think something also I'd like to get out there as well is that this has been in development for 2 years. It's probably taken a little bit longer than other apps or online tools, because the whole thing has been developed pro bono. So we've had myself working on this for free, the IT team working on this for free, they've developed it for free, our legal has been done for free, our marketing communications has all been done for free, and that's meant it's taken a little bit longer to develop, but it means that we are a registered charity and we have this out there that it's free to use for anyone. And so that's something that I think defines us from a lot of other things that are out there at the moment, and why perhaps it just takes a little bit longer to get going. But our mission is to make sure that anyone going through a personal crisis is well supported by their own network of friends and family, and this is how we're making sure that it happens.
Fantastic. So one of the big things is this is a free tool for everybody to use.
Correct.
Yeah, fantastic. So obviously for the women listening to the podcast, they are those with a breast cancer diagnosis or those around them with a breast cancer diagnosis. So would encourage them to definitely get on and check this out. Where can they find this? It's not an app at the moment, is it, Susan? It's an online tool right now.
It is. It's a web-based online tool. It is. You can be used on all mobile devices. What it does at the moment is it's email focused, so you will need people's emails in order to invite them, and we are looking to change that in our first round of upgrades, but at the moment you'll have to have the emails in order to make this run. But once you've got all that and you've put it all in, the system runs itself. So it can be a little bit time consuming at the top end. It can take about half an hour to set it up, but then it's done. And then you just don't have to worry about it. And a user tells this beautiful story, and she was one of the first users, and she was a breast cancer patient living in Brisbane, and she tells this story of she was a single mum of 2 boys, feeling completely overwhelmed, going to bed one night. Her breast care nurse had given her our brochure, and she sits up in bed with her iPad one night, and she sets up her account, and she invites 10 friends and just closes it up and goes to bed feeling very overwhelmed. And then she wakes up in the morning, clicks on her account, and 6 weeks of tasks have all been accepted by her friends while she slept.
Oh,
so
my
her
God.
boys were now going to be picked up from school, dropped off home. She had meals done for 6 weeks. She had their soccer sorted out for the weekend. She had someone doing the laundry, dropping off her groceries, and that happened while she slept.
Wow.
And the difference she talks about going to sleep feeling overwhelmed and then waking up feeling supported and looked after and nurtured by her community is just beautiful. And I think that's the difference we're trying to make. The support is there. We're not saying the support's not there. We're just saying you can activate it in the best possible way by using Gather My Crew.
Yeah, God, that story gives me a bit of goosebumps actually to think about that. It's quite extraordinary. And I think, as you say, the community, so people are doing really good and they do want to help and the community is there, but we've just not had, as you say, that bridge to facilitate this. And now it's there, and, you know, I would definitely encourage our listeners, if you are certainly in the midst of it or even post your treatment, as we know, the side effects, they linger. They can linger for up to 12 months, 24 months.
They do. Mm-hmm.
Get on and have a look at this. So what's the website for this where they can find all the information?
www.gathermycrew.org. When you do have a look at the website, you'll see big yellow buttons, which is just get started. And that's all you need. You have a look at the information, click on the yellow button and just get started. And there's nothing, you can always just start and have a bit of a play around, have a look. We don't lock you in. We don't collect, your details and send you spam. So it's a safe space to kind of just have a look. You've got nothing to lose.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the whole premise of this podcast that I'm doing is all about helping women with a breast cancer diagnosis to, I sort of say, stress less, move more, and feel better. This definitely sits in that stress less category. This is something that they can use to really help those stress levels when you are stressed enough going through everything that you're going through already. All the other little bits and pieces that build and become stressful, those drop-offs, pickups, foods, household chores, etc. This can immensely help alleviate that for them. So I'm so pleased that you've joined us on this podcast to talk about this, because I just think it is such a fantastic tool, obviously for our listeners who are women with a breast cancer diagnosis, but also for anybody going through cancer or obviously trauma as well. So your reach for this is quite broad as well, isn't it?
It is, and I think that being a psychologist, I don't like to define what crisis or what trauma is. I think it's a very personal thing, and I think people have different capacities to cope. So we've purposely not put restrictions around who can use this, because for some people, they might get hit by a car and bounce back and, be fine, and the family can kind of work their way through it. For other people, it is a serious life crisis. The same way, having a baby can throw some people into a spin, whereas others just take it in their stride. This is just about whether you feel that you are not on top of life and you just don't quite know how you're going to get through the next few weeks or months. And it's about that feeling of being overwhelmed and in crisis and almost like you're frozen because you just don't know where to go and how to start and how to get through, but you don't quite know what to do about it. So what we're saying is that this is the tool when you feel like you don't know how you're going to get through or what to do about it. Get online and gather your crew and let them help you through while you just sort yourself out and pick it up again when you're ready to pick it up. And that might be a couple of weeks, that might be a couple of months, for some people it might be a year or so. But, this is about building community so that people don't feel alone and vulnerable when they're struggling.
Yes, and I think it's important too for those that are in that community or those that are around those people going through those difficult times to, this is a great tool to suggest to them as well. So if you do want to do something to help them, and this is, this is a great way to do it, to talk to them about something like this and get them engaged with it, so then they can use it. And
it can actually be set up. We've set it up intentionally because some people will be too unwell to manage the logistics of setting this stuff up, or too overwhelmed. It actually has been set up so you can have someone act as a proxy on your behalf. So it doesn't need to be the person who's got breast cancer setting this up. It could be your nurse coordinator, it could be your best friend, it could be your sister or your mum. It's generally a woman. You know, it might be your husband, who can, it could be if you're lucky. But it's about having someone set it up for you. So, you know, they might be sitting side by side, but they're doing all the hard yards of entering the stuff in, you know, with chemo brain and the like. Trying to enter 20 emails could be a challenge. So, you know, that they might just sit there with you. Trying to remember all the tasks and the things that you have on can be a challenge. But also what we've found is that when friends and family set it up for you, they ask for more. Because they don't have any qualms about saying, yes, you do need someone to clean that toilet for you, Christy. Yes. And I'm going to make sure that we have Sally coming around on Wednesday to do that for the next 8 weeks. Yes. And I think that that's also a good way to get it up and get it running. If you are feeling a little uncomfortable about asking for help, Australians are terrible at it, just as a general rule.
We are.
That, you know, make someone sit down with you and give you a nudge every now and then when you think you can cope. You know, if you're setting it up when you're feeling good and you've got another round of chemo coming, but you're in one of your good days, you know, think about what it's going to be like when you're hitting your bad spots again and what you really will need.
I think it's a really important tool that you've got there where there can be somebody to set it up for them or to help them set it up, because often there are times, as you say, where you're just not in the right frame of mind, but you do still need the help, or you might just have a great husband or a partner that's just willing to sit down with you and go through it. So I think that's a really good feature, actually. I wasn't aware of that one.
Yeah. Look, some other things I think that you're not aware of unless you've played around with it that I think are really important is that we have this thing called the inner circle. And what the inner circle lets you do is when you're entering your crew members, you can identify those that are very close to you. So, you know, they're the people that you're comfortable doing all of your sensitive tasks. When you then identify your tasks, and for me, I've got young children, and when I'm unwell and I can't bath them all, I would really like to have someone come over and bath them, but I don't want someone 5 doors down that I don't really know coming into my house and bathing my children. We can identify those tasks as sensitive, and then only the inner circle gets those invites, which means that if it's changing of dressings or if it's putting on compression garments or if it's sitting by you when you're unwell or any of those things that you really only want a few special people to be able to do, you can make sure that the system only invites them. And then no one else knows that there's those sensitive tasks that are going out there. It's been set up so no one can see what other people are doing, which means that the comparisons that can sometimes happen about who's doing what and are they doing enough and they should be doing more, they've got lots of spare time. We've eliminated all that. No one can see what anyone else is doing. And it also means that you can protect who's doing what around you. It's about empowering the person in need so that they're always in control of the stuff that they can control. Because we know that with breast cancer treatment, you know, you can feel out of control with so much stuff, you know, least of all your body.
So that inner circle allows you to, there's obviously specific tasks, as you say. You don't want your neighbour from down the street doing for you or with you, so you can specify that inner circle.
Correct, yeah. The other thing that I briefly mentioned earlier is a lot of the other rostering tools that are out there have a shared URL, so it gets out there and then you get given a URL and you share your URL, which means that this can also be shared very broadly. And I've heard stories about where it's just put up on the class whiteboard, and then everyone just copies it down into their school diaries, and then, you know, you've got no control over who is looking at what you've put out there and who's accepting and who's cooking you meals. So what we do is we have this, it's a specific invite. It goes only out to that one person. It's attached to their email address, and then as soon as they've clicked on it, it's like, poof, mission impossible, it cannot be used again, which does cause some confusion because people are used to being able to hand things on and then they get confused when they can't activate it. But we've done that intentionally so that people can only ever be part of the crew if they've been specifically asked by the gatherer. It cannot be handed on. And in that way, it's a very, as much as you can on the internet, get a closed community that is protected. And that's a specific feature.
And it just enhances the privacy of it, doesn't it? Because often when you're going through breast cancer, that you are quite private about a lot of things. So the last thing you want to do is for everybody to know, you know, all these things that you need help with, I think, well, the whole world, but being able to keep it very private and very controlled is actually very important, as you say. Have you had any other sort of significant outcomes or stories from users to date?
Oh, we've had lots of great stories. I think the main theme that we're getting from people who have been using it is just, I don't know how I coped without it. And I think that's a really, people will cope, they do cope, but this is just a much better way to cope. And what I know as a psychologist is that when people come and see me and they are completely overwhelmed with the practical tasks of life, whether that be the drop-offs or the pickups or who's making the meal or who's even picking them up from hospital and taking them home or how are they going to get to the next appointment, they can't talk to me about the stuff that is important in their emotional recovery. They can't talk to me about their anxiety, their depression, their loss, their sense of hopelessness. That is really an also important part of the journey, being able to spend some time on this stuff. And so what I hope that using Gather My Crew then allows people to do is it takes that practical stuff out of the way and allows more of the emotional processing to happen. And I think what can often happen, I've seen it happen a lot with people with cancer, is that they hold it together until that very last treatment. And that last treatment happens and then they're discharged from hospital, and then all of a sudden the weight of the emotional trauma of the past months comes down on them. And at a time when they thought they would be feeling happy and relieved, they're actually extremely distressed. And a lot of that is about the lack of processing that happens during the treatment, because you're just trying to just get through and you're pedaling so fast to keep everything happening and keep on top of everything that when it finishes, it hits you like a freight train. And so what I'm hoping happens with this is that people they're not pedaling so fast during their treatment. They're given more space for some of that emotional stuff to rise to the surface and to be dealt with as it comes up, which means that when they are into survivorship, they're not hit by all the emotions. They will still come up, but hopefully it's a more gentle journey. And, we don't have the evidence for this yet, but, with 20 years of psychology behind me, I really think that that's also going to be one of the benefits we see.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things too, you sort of mentioned about being so overwhelmed throughout the process, that the things that do drop off are that almost mental and emotional health and that self-care. They all drop off significantly. So if there can be time created to keep those things at a priority during that period, which is of the utmost importance, then the whole process just becomes a little bit easier, doesn't it?
That's the hope. Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget relationships as well. I think as well, when everyone's pedaling so fast, it puts relationships down the bottom of the pile too. And, people can come out the other end and find themselves disconnected from even their partners and their children. And so it's also hopefully allowing that space to still thrive during the treatment as well.
It's such a challenging time, but I'm so glad that there are tools out there now that can genuinely help us, and this is definitely one of those.
I guess the only thing that I want to really make clear is that no one has to go through this kind of thing alone, that, there is always someone in your community that's available and willing to help. Sometimes it can take a little bit of thinking around who that community might be, but people are out there, and that if you can engage with them and if you can ask for help, what we've found is that people are very, very willing. And even if it's just one task every week that is taken off your plate, it will make a difference. So it doesn't have to be everything, but even just, Wednesday nights a meal is cooked for you. That's just one thing that you can have taken off your plate. So I just encourage people to think broadly. A lot of people say, I don't really have a lot of supports, but we've heard stories in the focus groups where a woman tells the story about, she was from Brisbane again, and she tells the story about how she was just in that time of her treatment where she was just feeling like she was nailing it. She was doing really well, and she had 2 teenage girls, and it was 7:30 on a Tuesday night, and she'd smashed it out. She'd done a great job, and she was feeling really good. And she went out to put out the bins, and it was one of those big green wheelie bins. And Brisbane can be very hilly, so some driveways are, at 90-degree angles. So she's putting this green wheelie bin up this ridiculously steep driveway, and she rips the stitches from her surgery right down under her arm. And she went from nailing it to in a puddle on her front driveway, where her 11-year-old had to come and find her and bring her back inside. And she tells that story now because, in retrospect, had she put out a call to her neighbours, who she might not know terribly well, but she knows well enough to knock on their door and say, "Can you help with the bins? I'm going through cancer," this would never have happened. And her neighbours would have been mortified to think that something as simple as putting out their bins when you do your own would have resulted in her not being bounced back into hospital to get herself stitched back up again. So I think that your community is out there and they're willing, and just think creatively about who they are.
Okay, thank you, Susan, for sharing all of that information with us about Gather My Crew. I am blown away by just how powerful this tool is going to be out there in the community. So I'm just so excited to see where it goes. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today and giving up your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Christy. It's been really lovely chatting to you, and thanks for the opportunity to get the word out about Gather My Crew to people who could really use it.
Thanks for listening to the Pink Movement podcast. For episode notes, links and downloads, head to thepinkmovement.com.au. Like what you're hearing? Join our Facebook page, subscribe through iTunes, and while you're there, provide a quick review. Want to help out? You can support the ongoing production of this podcast by becoming a patron. Find all the details on the website. The Pink Movement podcast, helping you to stress less, move more, and feel better.